Welcome, history enthusiasts. Today, we're unraveling the story of one of the most iconic and controversial figures of the 20th century, Ernesto Che Guevara, a man whose face adorns t-shirts and murals worldwide, yet whose legacy divides historians and revolutionaries alike. Was he a selfless champion of the oppressed, or a ruthless ideologue blinded by his own ideals? Strap in. This is no ordinary history lesson. By the end, you'll decide where you stand. And hey, if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe. The journey's just beginning. Che Guevara's story isn't just about revolution, it's about the power of symbols, the complexity of human morality, and how one man's life can ignite endless debate. Let's rewind to 1928, to the streets of Rosario, Argentina, where our story begins. Ernesto Guevara was born into privilege, a sharp contrast to the revolutionary firebrand he'd become. The son of an aristocratic Argentine family, young Ernestito battled asthma but devoured books on philosophy, poetry, and Marxism. Medicine, not revolution, was his first calling. By 23, he was a freshly minted doctor, but a single journey would shatter his worldview. In 1951, Guevara and his friend Alberto Granado hopped on a rickety motorcycle named La Poderosa, the Mighty One, and embarked on a 5,000-mile odyssey across Latin America. What started as an adventure became a brutal education. In Chile's copper mines, he met workers coughing their lungs out for pennies. In Puris leper colonies, he saw priests preaching resignation to the poor. In Guatemala, he witnessed the CIA-backed overthrow of a democratically elected president, Jacobo Arbenz, who dared to redistribute land from U.S. corporations to peasants. These experiences ignited a rage against injustice. In his diary, he wrote, "The person who wrote these notes died the day he stepped back on Argentine soil. The one who's reorganizing them is no longer me." The empathetic doctor was gone. In his place stood Che, a nickname meaning pal in Argentine slang, now synonymous with rebellion. But how did this disillusioned idealist become the architect of a revolution? Let's travel to Mexico City, 1955, where fate would introduce him to a man named Fidel Castro. Mexico City, 1955. A 27-year-old Che Guevara, now a radicalized Marxist, crossed paths with a fiery young lawyer named Fidel Castro. Their meeting was destiny. Castro dreamed of liberating Cuba from dictator Fulgencio Batista, a US-backed strongman who turned Havana into a playground for the mafia while peasants starved. Che, though not Cuban, signed on as the group's medic. But this reluctant doctor would soon become their most ruthless commander. In December 1956, Castro's ragtag band of 82 rebels, including Che, set sail for Cuba aboard the creaking yacht Granma. Batista's forces ambushed them, slaughtering most. The survivors fled to the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Malnourished, outgunned, and hunted, Che's leadership shone. He trained troops, executed traitors, and penned essays on guerrilla warfare. Asthma attacks nearly killed him, but he refused to quit. To Che, revolution wasn't a choice, it was a moral duty. The tide turned at Santa Clara. Che derailed an armored train carrying Batista's troops, using Molotov cocktails and sheer audacity. The victory broke the regime's spine. On January 1, 1959, Batista fled. Castro and Che rode into Havana as heroes. But what came next would cement Che's legacy and his infamy. As Cuba's minister, Che nationalized US-owned plantations, redistributed land to peasants, and launched a legendary literacy campaign. Hospitals and schools sprouted nationwide. Yet dissenters faced firing squads. Che oversaw the execution of hundreds, counter-revolutionaries, former allies, even comrades he deemed weak. To him, the ends justified the means. A revolutionary must become a cold-killing machine, he wrote. The US branded him a terrorist. To the global left, he was a saint. But Cuba was just the beginning. Che's restless spirit craved a global revolution, one that would ultimately lead to his downfall. By the 1960s, Che Guevara transcended politics. His steely gaze, captured in Alberto Cortés' iconic photograph, became the ultimate symbol of rebellion. Student protesters in Paris, Black Panthers in the US, and anti-colonial fighters in Africa brandished his image. But behind the romanticized myth lay a darker reality, one his admirers often ignore. As head of La CIA's tribunals, Che authorized hundreds of executions. Former Batista officials, alleged spies, even teenage dissenters faced the firing squad. Critics argue he wasn't just a revolutionary, he was a zealot. In his own words, to send men to the firing squad, judicial proof is unnecessary. These are the laws of the revolution. Yet, at the United Nations in 1964, He condemned U.S. imperialism to roaring applause, demanding justice for the global South. How do we reconcile these extremes? For many, Che's allure lies in what he represented: defiance against inequality. His 1965 farewell letter to Castro, abandoning power to fight for Congo's liberation, cemented his martyr image. But scholars like John Lee Anderson note, Che's tragedy was his inability to see that not every nation wanted his kind of revolution. Today, his legacy splits generations. In Bolivia, indigenous groups revere him as Saint Ernesto. In Miami's Cuban exile community, he's hated as a butcher. Even his death, mythologized in art and film, is contested. Was he a Christ-like martyr, or a failed revolutionary whose rigid ideology led to his demise? Which brings us to 1967, the final act of Che's life, a desperate, almost suicidal quest to ignite a continent. In 1966, Che Guevara vanished. Resigning from Cuban leadership, he disguised himself as a Uruguayan businessman and slipped into Bolivia. His goal: to spark a continent-wide revolution. But this time, the world had changed. The CIA, tipped off by defectors, hunted him. Bolivia's peasants, wary of this foreign guerrilla, reported his movements. Isolated, starving, and racked by asthma, Che's final diary entries reveal a man clinging to fading hope. This is the end. Let the world tremble at the sound of my last heartbeat. On October 9, 1967, Bolivian soldiers, backed by the CIA, executed Che in a dusty schoolhouse. His last words: "Shoot, coward. You are only killing a man." The photo of his corpse, eyes wide open, became a propaganda trophy. But in death, Che achieved immortality. Young radicals resurrected him as a secular saint. Even the Bolivian soldier who pulled the trigger later confessed, "I felt like I'd killed part of myself." Today, Che's legacy is a Rorschach test. To some, he's a reminder that inequality demands radical action. To others, a cautionary tale of idealism corrupted by violence. His image, stripped of context, fuels everything from anti-capitalist movements to fashion brands. Yet historians agree, Che's greatest impact wasn't his victories, but his unshakable belief that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. Irony: his love for humanity often clashed with his disdain for individual lives. So, was Che Guevara a hero or a villain? The answer isn't in this video, it's in you. History isn't carved in stone, it's a mirror reflecting our own values. Che's story forces us to ask, how far is too far in the fight for justice? Can violence ever birth peace? And when does a man become a myth? If this deep dive left you questioning, debating, or Googling late into the night, do us a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss our next historical deep dive. Drop a comment, hero, villain, or something in between. We read every single one. Until next time, keep questioning history.